It's interesting to think about how cautious I was to sort of, as you say, come out to my colleagues at the university. I was always very guarded about who I was and what I did. But interestingly enough, in the community where I lived, Elle and I were accepted, without question. The neighbors across the street, and these are all straight couples, never had a problem. We would socialize, exchange baked goods, and have dinner together once in a while, and there wasn't any. In fact, within several houses around me, I never had any problem. We felt very much accepted by the community in which we lived, where I didn't feel accepted in the community where I worked. In fact, I remember one day, I tried to keep the lid on the fact that I was gay. I had many graduate students, and eventually they figured it out, and if it bothered them, they never dare say anything because I was their major professor. Elle and I always entertained my students and their wife or husband at our home at Christmas every year, and so that was never a problem. But I remember one experience. A colleague on campus the gossip finally got around to him. And I was sitting in my office one day. My mind was a million miles away. I was working on a document or a book or a paper or something. I was concentrating so hard on what I was trying to write. And all of a sudden he pounds in my office. And I look up and he says, "I understand you don't like girls." Well, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I said, "What do you mean I don't like girls?" I was thinking, the secretary, of course I like the secretary. That's the only thing that hit. And then he grumbled and walked out. And to this day, he has never spoken to me again. He was so traumatized by the fact that I was a gay man, he just couldn't handle it. And then I had other colleagues who knew I was gay, and then played that trump card against me in very subtle ways. And there's nothing I could do. I wasn't going to make a big scene about all this, go to the department head or the dean that I was being harassed, because that just was not appropriate for me. So I just lived with it. But in my retirement party, it was interesting. I had friends from all over town. My dentist came. This woman came from Argentina, especially for my retirement party. The former department head came in, all kinds of friends and colleagues, but hardly any of the faculty that were my colleagues for all these years didn't show up. So that should give you some idea of how this bias and prejudice can affect you, which you learn to live with. And I just shrug it off, It's my business, it's none of yours, forget it. But it's interesting that the dean at the time, who was responsible for hiring me, he had a gay son. And so he would come over to the house, instead of going home, he'd come to the house from the office to wait for some social event and sit in the living room and read the paper or have a drink or something with my partner and I. And then he'd say, okay, thanks, I've got to go to my function, and he'd go off. So it depends upon so many factors that I can't decide what makes someone accept a gay man and why someone opposes it. I always have a feeling that when someone dislikes a gay person so much that there's something in that individual, a sensitive point that you inadvertently have touched that they don't like. And so that's my rationale and how I can put up with it, that I think this is a part of the psychology of all this. And let me see.